Hello, and welcome to the pilot episode of the Not a Statistic podcast. My name is Sam, and fair warning before we jump into this trauma dump sesh. I am not a mental health professional. In no way do I have a bachelor's, master's, doctorate, nothing like that in psychology. I have a minor. That doesn't really do much, though. I'm simply just a girl who's had some fucked up shit happen to her in her life, and in the end, it really has made me a stronger individual. The central message for this podcast is your trauma does not define you, it can shape you into something great. A little background about me is when I was growing up, I didn't have the easiest childhood. I mean, I don't think most of us do, but I definitely had some interesting, we'll say interesting, circumstances to deal with. And I just really ended up having a different mindset and outlook on life and how I wanted to go about my life and really my thoughts for the future and what I wanted to do. And my thing that I always knew was that I always told myself, even from a young age, that I don't want to be a statistic. And essentially that means, you hear all the statistics where it's like, oh, if this has happened to you, then you're going to turn out bad. Or if XYZ's happened to you, then you're most likely going to end up in prison. Obviously, I'm not in prison. I'm here recording this episode, so hey, we've got that down. But in all honesty, I just really expected myself to always do good things, and I didn't want to stray away from the path of just bettering myself as an individual. In future episodes, I plan to talk one-on-one with you, the audience, about my life a little more in depth. And also what skills I've used to become successful as a young adult. Also a little background. Currently I'm 21. My birthday is in next month. Yeah, it's next month. That's crazy. November 20th. Maybe I'll do a cute little birthday episode. We'll see. I also will have some special guests, such as mental health professionals and friends as well that have shared experiences. My hope for those of you listening is that you know that you're not alone. Like I said a little bit before, these experiences are definitely hard to talk about. We're going to talk about some touchy subjects. We're going to get into a lot of things that most people don't like to sit down and say, hi, my name's Sam, and here's my trauma dump such. But I want this space to be inviting. I want this to be an experience, not only for me, but for the guests that I bring on to open up about their lives, feel comfortable to talk with me, and see what has helped them also not become a statistic. A little fact that I found on the internet as well. According to a 2019 study, around 60% of Americans have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. This is what we like to call an ACE. I'll be using this acronym a lot, ACE, and I'll get into this a little bit too after this. ACEs are potentially traumatic events that occur before a child is 18 years old. These events can include abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, mental illness, divorce, or an incarcerated relative. Essentially, if you've had something very detrimental to happen to you, or you witnessed something that really just kind of altered the course of your life, you have been affected by one or more ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences is what the acronym stands for. So if I ever say ACEs again, which I definitely will in future episodes, that is what it stands for. Being a young adult in today's society is really challenging enough, but dealing with the demons of your past can start to consume your adult life. Many people believe that those with childhood trauma tend to struggle more in their adult lives. But for me personally, I've been affected by every single ACE possible. And I have graduated from high school. I got accepted into top 3 colleges. I've made the dean's list almost every single semester. I got to work at one of the biggest newspaper organizations in Las Vegas, where I'm from. And I'm also graduating in May with my bachelor's degree in journalism. So I think for me personally, I really did take some of the worst moments of my life and I tried to make them into a more of a teachable, learnable experience for myself. And that might sound weird, and obviously you don't know everything about me just yet. But my central message, like I said, is that your trauma does not define you. It can shape you into something great. And I am definitely the poster child for this situation. Like I said, I've been affected by almost every single ace there is possible, and I've been able to make it out on the other side. And I've done some really cool things. I've met some really great people. And overall, I'm just really proud of myself as an individual. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for how hard life can be in general, but also when you're dealing with some of these things that are harder to talk about, or traumatic experiences that kind of shape the rest of your life and change the course of how things are going to be. I think it's difficult and it's hard to give yourself that, some credibility and say, I did this, I was able to do all these things, and I didn't have a lot of good cards to deal with in my deck, but I was still able to at least use everything that I've done and make it into something great. I also think the phrase, it gets better, is kind of bullshit. I think if anything, it'll only get better if you're willing to put in the work and then kind of change the way you think about your struggles. For example, I've been diagnosed with, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have some PTSD. All things I've been diagnosed by a mental health professional for these things. I'm not just pulling them out of thin air here. But I've taken those things, and through me going to therapy, me talking out my problems, me writing down my problems, or just thinking about everything that I deal with in general, the biggest piece of advice I took away from my favorite therapist, shout out Sandy, we love you. We love you, Sandy. You're never probably going to hear this ever, but I love you so much. She's my queen. Anyways, the biggest piece of advice that she gave me about anxiety is it's never going to go away. So you kind of just have to learn to live with it. You have to learn to love your anxiety. And it's essentially what's been used to protect me my whole life. And without it, I don't know where I would be. I think anxiety definitely has a negative connotation, and nobody wants to have anxiety, and nobody wants to be like me, and I'm medicated because my anxiety is so extreme. But I think when you have this mindset of always being in a fight or flight mode, or always being cautious, always thinking about what's behind the corner, what's down the alleyway, what's next to come, it really has been a tool for me to kind of plan my life out and look ahead. It's also been very exhausting, which is where the depression comes into hand. I do get sad eventually, obviously. Everyone gets sad. COVID really was the worst part for me. It hit me pretty hard. And after that, I just vowed to myself, I turned 18 during the pandemic, and I was like, I want to get my shit together. I want to go to therapy. I want to start actively talking about my issues. I want to start breaking these bad habits, and I don't want to continue this cycle of just negativity and abuse and things that I've just had to experience through my life, or just from my genetics. On both sides of my family are fucked up, to say the least. And we'll get into that in future episodes, obviously. But I think the biggest thing just from that is, like I said, just taking what you have and learning what to do with it. And my support system, everyone's support system is very different. It doesn't have to be your family. It could be your favorite professor. It can be your therapist. It can be your best friend, your partner. It could be anyone that you feel a sense of trust and belonging with. And I think that's really important, that everyone is to have a good support system. And definitely it's hard to find, because a lot of people also, everyone's favorite word nowadays is 2024, trauma dump. I've used it 1,800 fucking times already at the span of this episode. But trauma dumping can also be a therapeutic way to connect with people. I've had plenty of trauma dump sessions with people that I've met, and I'm like, oh my God, your life was traumatic? Mine too. So I think that me also as an individual, I use humor to cope with my problems. I just have always done that. It's not even like I'm like, oh, ha ha ha, my dad sucks. No, it's I try to make it funny, but not where it's like, oh God, this is depressing. God, I hate the word dark humor. It's not even like that at all. But I think that the way that we cope with our problems is universal. I think some ways it's good, some ways it's bad, but taking a second to really just sit back and really reflect on your life is very helpful. I might be jumping around a bit, but I'm kind of just going off the dome at this point. I had a script, but I think it's more personable if I just explain more. Go on my little rant. But I think at the end of the day, what has happened personally to me as an individual definitely shaped my life in the end. And when I was growing up, thinking about this now, I'm 21, like I said, I'll be 22 soon. If I would have known all the things I got to do and how maybe one shitty experience could turn out to shape my life for the better, I'd honestly be astonished at all the things I really did get to do. I always tried my best to excel in school. I tried to make friends, even though that was really hard because I'm kind of not, I don't know. I would say I don't like to talk to people, but all I do is yap. I mean, I'm literally starting a podcast about myself, so there's that. But it's not even that this podcast is about myself. It's more that this is about me telling my story, and I really do want to open it up to friends, family members. I have some mental health professionals as well that I want to get in contact with and hopefully have them as guests. And I want to make this experience mainly feel like a safe environment. I want anyone that walks in the studio, sits down with me, has a normal conversation to me, not to feel like I'm asking them a million questions. I never want to make anyone feel uncomfortable, obviously. I'm talking about the worst parts of your life. But I just want them to be able to share and kind of reflect and say, hey, I did this, but in the end it made me stronger. Or sadly, this happened to me, but in the end, I was able to do all these great things. And my hope in the end is that I can create something really just inviting and overall good. And I think that's very basic in terms of wording, but honestly, sometimes you gotta get a little simple with it because the story is really what is the thing that's gonna overpower. I want people to share their stories, me sharing my story, and I want people to relate. That's the biggest thing we have, I think, definitely, in the age group of me as a young adult. It's the biggest thing we have is relating to other people. I mean, through social media, through shared experiences, anything. If you understand each other, it's just automatically snap connection. I don't know how to describe it in that way, but